From censored files to clear evidence, this is Redacted Realms.
His eyes snapped open, and the familiar shape of his bedroom ceiling was gone. The air in his lungs tasted stale, thick with the scent of damp earth and something metallic, like old pennies. He reached for the lamp, his fingers brushing the cold, sticky surface of the nightstand. The click of the switch echoed, but no light came. From the hallway, a low, wet scratching began, rhythmic and deliberate, dragging itself along the floorboards. His breath hitched, trapped in his throat as a whisper seeped under the door. Not a voice, but the sound of static and broken glass. This was his house. Every piece of furniture in its place, but the geometry was wrong. The world had been replaced with a perfect, terrifying replica, and something was now awake inside it with him. It was just off by a single, impossible inch. Then, the reflection in the eye shifted with a sickening, almost imperceptible jump. The mailbox was now slightly out of frame, displaced by that impossible distance. A metallic, coppery scent filled the air as the world subtly reconfigured itself. The sound was a deep, sub-bass thud that seemed to vibrate through the very earth. This isn't a story about a ghost. It's about a town that went to sleep in one place and woke up somewhere else. The backstory. Warm, sun-drenched shots of a picturesque small town. The air there smelled of fresh bread and cut grass. A memory now preserved like a photograph. Galloway, Ohio, the kind of place where they still measure distance in smiles, not miles. But that quaint warmth holds a peculiar chill, a subtle wrongness, like the faint metallic tang of ozone before a storm. The laughter of the children carries, yet beneath it, a low, rhythmic scratching whispers from the old oak at the park's edge. It's a sound that doesn't belong, a dissonant note in the town's peaceful melody, making the very air feel thick and watchful. This is where Sarah and Ben Miller sought peace, a quiet refuge after the city's relentless noise. They craved a fresh start, a clean slate far from the urban clamor. But as Sarah tended her roses, the sweet scent of blooms mingled with an underlying odor of damp earth and something faintly metallic. The air, still and heavy, carried not the silence they'd hoped for, but a low, almost imperceptible hum from the woods beyond. BN, pragmatic but kind, applied fresh paint to the porch swing, while their neighbor, elderly Mr. Peterson, observed from his rocking chair with an unnervingly blank expression. The narrator explained that Sarah, a landscape photographer, was captivated by the sharp, perfect angles of the old Victorian houses. Her partner, Ben, an architect, found a deep admiration for the town's timeless, almost geometric precision. Yet, as Ben worked, the only sound was the sticky drag of the brush and the faint, dry creak of Mr. Peterson's chair, a sound that carried the faint, sweet scent of decay. The neighborhood welcomed them, mostly. But old Mr. Peterson next door, he'd just stare, then mutter, "Gallows has good bones." His words hung in the damp evening air, carrying the faint scent of ozone and wet earth. There was something in his delivery, a flat, matter-of-fact tone that made the simple phrase feel like a verdict. Not a warning, but a statement of something already settled, leaving only the heavy, sticky silence that followed. Sarah glanced up, offering a tentative smile to Mr. Peterson. He offered no warmth in return, his expression vacant as he maintained his steady, unnerving rocking. The air around him felt thick and still, carrying the faint, sweet scent of decay, like roses left too long in a vase. That scent was the first detail to truly root itself in her awareness. It was a warning, subtle as a whisper, that something here was profoundly out of place. In her garden, Sarah knelt with a measuring tape stretched between a specific rose bush and the house corner, her brow furrowed in confusion. The climbing rose on the trellis now sat exactly 1 inch further from the kitchen window than it had yesterday. A cold, earthy scent rose from the soil as she stared, the impossibility of it settling in her gut like a stone. She had sworn she'd pruned it flush. This was wrong. Ben dismissed it with a nervous chuckle. Ben, memories distort, sweetheart. You're comparing reality to a fading echo. Sarah's cherished coffee mug now faced left instead of right. In the hallway, a sliver of floorboard peeked from beneath the throw rug's edge. Ben's drafting table, once perfectly centered beneath the north light, required subtle adjustment. These quiet misalignments accumulated, a collective shift in their reality. Doors Sarah knew she'd secured would be slightly ajar come morning. Floorboards that had been silent for years began groaning in new, unsettling locations. The entire town was gripped by a shared, persistent déjà vu, as if reality was a perfect copy laid over the original, just slightly misaligned. Seeking answers, Sarah made her way to the town's tiny, forgotten library. In the yellowed newspapers, mundane headlines stretched for decades, but one small ad repeated like a stubborn ghost. Lost. One sense of place. If found, do not return. Then she met Mike, the bartender, at the hitching post. He moved with the slow certainty of worn routine, polishing a glass that would never truly be clean. His eyes weren't just tired. They were the eyes of someone who had witnessed the shift itself, and now carried its silent, heavy weight. In the dimly lit bar, Mike, a weary man in his 40s, polished a glass while listening to Sarah, his movements mechanical. Sarah's voice cut through the quiet. "You feel it too, don't you?" she asked, the question hanging in the stale air. Mike sighed heavily, his eyes never leaving the glass. "Don't measure the roses, lady," he muttered, his voice low and weary. He finally set the glass down with a soft clink. "Measure the town," he finished, the words carrying a weight of unspoken dread. Under the oppressive cloak of midnight, Sarah knelt at the intersection's heart, the cold asphalt leaching warmth from her skin. The acrid scent of aerosol paint cut through the damp air as she pressed the nozzle. With a final, decisive hiss, the mark was set at the monument's base, a fixed point against the town's shifting, unseen currents. It was a benchmark, not on any map, but etched into the fabric of her unraveling reality. Her sleep was fractured by visions of miniature tectonic plates, grinding like glass shards in the void. At dawn's first gray light, Sarah stumbled from her bed, the robe clinging damply to her skin. The morning air carried the metallic tang of ozone and the faint, sweet decay of wet earth. Her gaze locked, unblinking, on the crude X carved into the frost on her lawn. Her eyes locked on the monument, and reality twisted. The solid granite base now overlapped her mark by exactly 1 inch. The chalk X was now visible just to the right of the stone. A cold dread settled in her chest as she scanned the empty street. Every storefront, every curb, every tree had subtly shifted, as if the town itself had been rearranged in the dark. A profound, unnatural silence pressed down, broken only by the faint, wet scent of ozone hanging in the still air. Sarah's voice was a breathless whisper. "Ben." In the frantic climax she gestured, and his gaze followed, locking onto the impossible truth. His logical mind short-circuits, unable to process the impossible. They argue in the frigid darkness, his voice cracking with desperate rationality. "This is insane. A paving shift, frost heave, something," he insists, grasping at logical explanations. "Every single night, then?" Sarah's whisper cuts through his denial, heavy with unspoken dread. 1 inch to the left? The air in the room felt thick, like old dust and forgotten paperwork. His placid smile never wavered as they stammered out their impossible story. Then, softly, he finally spoke. "The Miller family, right? Heard you're settling in. Galloway. Takes some getting used to. It's an old place." It was the smile that terrified her. It wasn't a smile of disbelief, but of grim recognition. A silent pact formed in that look, a vow to never speak of what they'd seen. The scent of ozone and damp earth hung heavy around them. That night, they chose to stay awake, their vigil a shield against the creeping dread outside. Midnight found Sarah and Ben stationed by their living room window, the camera's lens fixed unblinkingly on the X and the silent monument beyond. The street lay deserted, an empty stage under the indifferent glow of a lone street lamp, as the clock's hands crept toward 3:03 a.m. Then, the silence fractured, not with a sound, but with a sensation. A deep, sub-audible vibration that thrummed up from the floorboards. The air in the room grew dense and metallic, tasting of ozone, as the vibration settled into their bones like a forgotten frequency. It wasn't a sound you heard, but a vibration that hummed deep in the enamel of Sarah's teeth. The coffee in her mug didn't ripple. The entire surface slanted, as though the floor beneath it had subtly canted. A metallic scent, like ozone after a storm, pricked at her senses. Then, with a sensation not of movement but of finality, the world clicked. The monument now stood directly over the X, a perfect, unnatural alignment. There was no movement, no sound, just a sudden, absolute stillness that made the air feel thick and metallic. It wasn't a jump or a transition, it was a cut, like a splice in a film reel. Reality itself had been severed, leaving behind a gaping, silent seam where the world had been torn. One frame, she's here. The next, she's there. Ben's voice catches, thick with disbelief. "No." Outside, Sarah moves in a trance, her steps deliberate and slow. The air thickens, charged with a sharp, metallic scent of ozone. She turns her head, her gaze fixing on Mr. Henderson. Peterson's house stood silent, his rocking chair on the porch moving with a slow, empty rhythm. And that's when she saw them. Not with her eyes, but with something deeper. A scent like wet earth and ozone filled the air, cold and electric against her skin. The chair's creak became the only sound as her mind registered what her eyes could not. In the negative space, in the darkness between the houses that had somehow gained an inch, Sarah's gaze locked on that impossible sliver of void, the air around her growing dense and cold, carrying a faint, metallic scent like old pennies. From within that new inch of shadow came a sound, not a movement, but a slow, wet exhalation, like something long submerged breaking the surface. Her breath hitched, trapped in her throat, as the familiar boundary of her world was quietly, irrevocably breached. The darkness before her felt dense, almost tangible, as if it had weight and depth. For a fleeting moment, a faint, spectral imprint of her own home flickered in the void, occupying the exact space it held the day before. This place was a town of echoes, of residual memories and objects piling up unseen in the abyss just beyond normal sight. Then Sarah's whisper cut through the oppressive stillness, carrying a realization that froze the air in her lungs. "We're not moving, we're being copied." And what remained? In the alley's gloom, the phantom house afterimage rotated slowly. A doorway that shouldn't exist swung open on silent hinges. and in that impossible threshold stood a shadow, a form shaped like the man, but carved from a deeper, more absolute night. It raises a hand, not in greeting, but in a slow, deliberate beckon. The air grows thick with the scent of ozone and damp earth. A low, persistent scratching echoes from the walls, like something trying to claw its way through. Morning arrives to a town restored to eerie normalcy. The Miller house standing silent and still. Ben's hands trembled as he shoved clothes into the suitcase, his face the color of old ashes. "We're leaving today," he whispered. The words, tasting of ozone and tang. He could smell the sharp, metallic tang of fear in the stale air. "This is a mass hallucination," he insisted, his voice cracking. "A gas leak. It has to be." They were leaving, and Sarah didn't argue. She simply sank into a chair, her movements hollow, her gaze locked onto a photograph of their rose garden from the first day. The air in the kitchen grew thick with the scent of forgotten blooms and dust, a stark contrast to the image's perfection. She raises the photograph, aligning its faded edges with the window frame. A perfect match, except for everything within it. The air thickens with the scent of damp paper and something metallic, like old coins left in the rain. A faint scratching sound, like nails on wood grain, whispers from the walls as they exchange a loaded glance. Without a word, they slip into the car, and Ben starts the engine, the mechanical growl swallowing the oppressive quiet. He took the route south, toward the interstate. For an hour, he drove past familiar landmarks, the fading farms, the ancient oak, the rusted creek bridge. Then slowed the car. His knuckles turned bone white against the wheel, the leather groaning under his grip. Ahead, the "Welcome to Galloway" sign materialized from the gloom, confirming their approach from the north. Ben's response was a fractured whisper, cracking under the weight of realization. Sarah turned from the window. Her earlier fear dissolved into a void of chilling acceptance. Her voice was unnervingly steady as she stated the impossible truth. The road didn't turn, Ben. The town had absorbed us. We were now part of its strange geometry. The air inside the car grew dense, tasting of old dust and cold iron. Every familiar landmark on our street now felt alien, a detail in a blueprint we couldn't comprehend. A low, resonant hum vibrated through the chassis. A sound felt more than heard as the car rolled forward. Mr. Peterson stands on his porch, his lips curling into a smile that never touches his hollow eyes. The air carries the faint, metallic scent of ozone, like the breath before a storm. A damp chill clings to the skin, raising gooseflesh in the unnatural quiet. The final shot that night would reveal what that smile truly meant. Sarah lay awake beside Ben's sleeping frame as the digital clock silently clicked to 3:03 a.m. A deep sub-bass thud resonated in her chest, a physical pressure she felt rather than heard. The air grew dense with the scent of ozone and something faintly metallic, like old copper. Her muscles locked, a primal dread anchoring her to the bed as she refused to turn toward the window. Her eyes remained fixed on the ceiling's blank expanse. With glacial intent, she slides her hand 1 measured inch across the bedsheet. She acknowledges this subtle displacement without resistance. So sleep tight. Feel your house settle around you. Hear the floorboard groan from an unfamiliar corner of the room. And ask yourself, when you fumble for your glass in the dark tonight, will your fingers find it on the first try? Or will you have to grope blindly, just 1 inch to the left? The air turns thick with the scent of old wood and cold dust. The final, resonant thud echoed through the chamber, its vibration lingering in the dense air. An acrid scent of ozone and ancient dust coated his throat, sharp and metallic. The oppressive stillness that followed was not empty, but thick, with a watchful, unseen presence. Then, from the absolute quiet, a new sound began. A slow, wet drip that seemed to come from everywhere at once.
If this file opened your eyes, subscribe and open the next case.